discussed on this podcast are determined by the Justice Coordinating Commission of the Sisters of Providence of St. Mary of the Woods, Indiana. Guest opinions do not necessarily reflect those of the Sisters of Providence. To learn more, go to www.spsmw.org.
Welcome to Just Us, where we talk about creating an equitable human community and influencing change. Through shared stories, conversation, and inspiration, you will learn how just us can make a difference in our communities. Motivated by experiences and insights, let's take action for the common good. And if not now, tell me when. I am your host, Jane Fisher, Providence Associate, and I am with you today from Southern Indiana. In today's episode, our guest is a flautist and activist, Juan Carlos. He recently developed and produced a live concert as a fundraiser for Make the Road New Jersey, a nonprofit that advocates for immigrant rights. Concerts and fundraisers are common, but I have never heard of a production like his. Juan Carlos is joining us in this shared space to open our eyes, provide a new perspective, and show how art, such as music, can communicate, inspire, and touch our hearts. I believe Juan will offer us a totally new and fresh perspective about music being a means for activism and change. Get ready, listeners. You are about to meet a very talented man who is a musician and a fundraiser. It will become obvious that he has been doing a lot of soul searching and reflecting about the personal feelings and experiences of others. Before we formally introduce our guest and our topic today, we are going to ask you, our listeners, to get a sheet of paper and pen ready, and just think of this as audience participation. Please tell our listeners what's coming up, Juan.
You will need your paper and a pen to write down the following questions and take time to reflect on each one. This is not going to be a difficult assignment. We are not expecting an essay. I hope you are familiar with the stop and play buttons on your screen. Stop appears as two parallel lines. Trust me on this. After you touch the stop button, it will turn into a play button that looks like a triangle pointing to the right. After I say try it, touch or click the stop and then the play button. Ready? Try it. Okay. Get ready now to listen to the 4 questions and then press stop. Write down the questions that Jane will give you and then use the play button for the next question. Jane, take it away.
Okay. I hope they see the pause button. What does home mean to you? Pause. What is something you had to leave behind? Pause. What gives you hope? Pause. What has been your greatest challenge? Pause. Okay, you have your homework finished. Now on to the show. Who are we? In Spanish is ¿Quiénes somos? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And to help us with that question, welcome, Juan Carlos. Where are you and what's the weather there?
Hello, Jane. I'm calling in from Elizabeth, New Jersey. Weather is finally getting nicer. I'm really excited for the spring to come in after this long and kind of difficult winter. So I'm excited for being outside and, getting to do more work like what we're going to talk about today.
Okay. At the beginning of this podcast, we asked our listeners to write down 4 questions and reflect on each of them before continuing to listen. Juan, can we walk through these questions and tell us some of the stories that you heard in preparing for and at your concert?
I would be happy to, Jane. And just before I do that, I'm going to add a little bit of context. The stories that we collected for this concert were collected anonymously. So we don't know the gender, age of any of our submissions. As we hear some of the answers, I'd like to invite listeners to place humanity at the forefront. The responder could be your neighbor. It could be somebody sitting next to you on the train or the bus. It could be somebody walking their dog outside. These stories are key in revealing who it is that we are, which is the title of my project. Who are we?
Okay. First, what does home mean to you, Juan? And to answer that, can you read a response from someone who attended your fundraiser concert or answer it for yourself?
I'll do a little bit of both. So, like I said, I'm calling in from Elizabeth, New Jersey. This is where I grew up. This is where I had my most formative years. For me, home has always meant a melting pot. Diversity in Elizabeth, New Jersey was not something that I was actively conscious of. It was the default. Immigrant communities that have come together all to find a better life for their families and themselves. So for me, home has always meant a rich tapestry of people. But I'll share also one of the anonymous stories that we received for this concert of someone describing their home, or rather, what it is like to be away from their home. It's a strange experience to be far away from all your loved ones, to feel like you're from another planet in a place that's so different, for better or for worse. But I was lucky that my mom and brother were able to emigrate too. But I miss my family, the streets where I grew up, the food, the atmosphere. I really appreciate what this country has given me. But not a day goes by that I don't remember my homeland and feel nostalgic, with a feeling of emptiness in my chest.
As I listened to that, I tried to think, okay, is that a woman? Is that an older person? Is that a man? It doesn't matter. Those feelings are universal, aren't they?
Absolutely. And, a lot of us have this benefit of being home, having our home be, accessible to us. And I think what this story highlights is that home is something that is not so clear cut for everybody. Of course, we make our home wherever we move to, but there's something that's nostalgic and that always has a magnetic pull to a place that we grew up in. And the relationship to that place isn't always so clear as it is for us.
Yes. Okay, let me answer the next one, if I may, from my experience. The question, what was something you left behind? And this is what I wrote. I personally left a lot of things behind. My grandmother's piano was one thing that I really missed, but then I only moved 2.5 hours away to attend college. And if I wanted to get home, I knew I could. But I knew I left behind my family, and this move, this college experience, was going to change my life. Even though I was able to go home whenever I wanted, I missed my loved ones terribly: cousins, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. I was used to seeing them all the time.
Thank you for sharing that bit about your personal story, Jane. Family, I've found, has been a huge through line when it comes to the content of a lot of immigrant stories and in a lot of these anonymous testimonies. To kind of put an emphasis on that through line, would you please read one of the responses we received to this question?
Sure. When I left my country, I left behind my family, my friends, everyone I knew, to go to a strange place. It hurt me deeply to leave my daughter behind. It was very painful. I spent my time crying and thinking about her. Everything I did was to be reunited with her again and give her a better life. Although I have experienced many moments of discrimination for being an immigrant or for not speaking English well, it has been a necessary sacrifice. Thank God, after 2 years, I was able to bring my daughter here and obtain documentation. The sacrifice I made was worth it to get my family ahead, yet a part of me could never fully return to my country or my family. My dad died before I could return to my country, and nothing was the same. Now I have my family here, but I never stopped thinking about what I lost in the process. I came to this country because I had no other way to get ahead. I started a family and even managed to help most of my family come live here. I wish I could have shared what I have achieved with my dad before he passed away. I know he would have been proud of me and the life I have built.
Yeah, one thing about this story is especially heartbreaking is that a lot of times when we leave home, we leave an environment that we'll never come back to again, whether that's because a certain dynamic has changed. In this case of this, in this anonymous testimony, a death in the family, and leaving behind your family, a daughter, because it's something that is necessary to survival is not a unique experience in the lives of immigrants. In fact, I would venture to say that a lot of immigrants, the majority of immigrants, have this in mind when they come seeking a better life. So, what we leave behind is quite important, and I hope that listeners can draw parallels to, what some people might need to leave behind, versus what we might feel we need to leave behind as well. The next question is, what gives you hope? For me personally, what gives me hope is to see people mobilized and in action, calling for the rights and dignity of all people. During these times where it may seem like we are not able to change anything, what we must never do is give in to despair. Hope is what drives us forward, and it only takes 3% of an opinion to change to turn a tide. So, with that in mind, I want to read another anonymous response that answers the same question. I know that times are harder than ever, but we are resilient, hard-working people, full of love and hope. I would tell them not to give up, not to believe that all is lost, and that although there are bad people who hate us and see us as less than themselves, there are also people who appreciate us, who value everything that Latinos and all foreigners have contributed for hundreds of years to this beautiful and diverse country. Love will always triumph over hate.
It's hard to move on after each one of these, isn't it? Just want to sit and think about it again. But we can always rewind and replay.
Absolutely.
This isn't the end of our podcast, but this is the last question that our listeners wrote down. What is your greatest challenge?
I'll read our final response here from our anonymous testimonies answering this question: what is your greatest challenge? This one for me was particularly difficult to hear because although these stories were collected anonymously, I know for a fact that this one came from a member of my family.
Oh,
One of the jobs I had while I was in the process of obtaining my documents was in a metal factory. I worked polishing metal, which was very physically demanding manual labor. And I always wore a mask so I wouldn't breathe in the metal dust. This was my only source of income, which I used to pay for my living expenses and the legal process I was going through to obtain documentation. The stress of this physical work, the worry over my immigration status, and being paid less than minimum wage came to a head when I was fired from my job due to discrimination against Latino workers. They fired me without paying me. I lost my only source of income and had no safety net. I couldn't pay my rent, send money to my family in my country, or cover my own living expenses. This changed me as a person because I had to become resourceful. I had to survive, find another job, and always fight to keep going. In the most stressful moments, instead of breaking down, I had to transform myself into someone who fights relentlessly. So this story highlights a lot of how I would describe the immigrant community. And this is coming from the perspective of somebody that comes from the Latino community. But I think it speaks for a lot of immigrants, regardless of where you're coming from, that you've uprooted your life and you have to start over. And a lot of times they're starting at a disadvantage and they're starting in positions where they're often exploited. But as a result, there's something that's gained, a resilience that challenge molds you into, right? And of course, it's not something that should be happening, but it's something that becomes this overwhelming, defining characteristic for the immigrant community, which is why I felt it was really important to include this testimony in particular.
Thank you. It couldn't get any closer to home, could it, for you?
Right, right.
So our listeners, when writing those four things down, were talking about themselves. So could you tell us four things about yourself?
Absolutely. A little bit about myself is, well, as we've already spoken about, my name is Juan Carlos Narvaez. I grew up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and I went through my most formative years here. When I went to university, I got to my bachelor's degree at West Virginia University in music performance. I'm a flutist. That's my specialty, my area of concentration. After achieving my bachelor's degree, I actually went to study for my master's in Europe. And while I was in Europe, I achieved two master's degrees from different conservatories in music performance, different areas of music performance. I've always been dedicated to making beautiful music, but for that music to say something. I've worked with composers to commission pieces that advocate for different marginalized groups, which leads me to my project Quienes Somos, or Who Are We, which is what we're going to talk about today. Basically, this has been a labor of love, and I was so lucky to have been connected with one of the producers of this podcast, Susie Ray, who heard about my project and really wanted to highlight it. So just to give you a little bit more context about Quienes Somos, the Quienes Somos came to me during a moment of panic. I grew up in an immigrant community as a first generation American. So I had the first view of the trials and tribulations and also the joys that the immigrant community goes through in order to make a better life for themselves and their families. I witnessed a lot, but also have been in an advocate role my whole life, acting as a translator and a proxy for my family in lots of situations, ever since I was maybe too young to even understand what I was translating. I never had an aha moment when it came to advocating for immigrant communities or seeing their humanity in the face of discrimination, because the experience I had from a young age opened me up to compassion and a sense of justice even before I was aware that that's what it was. Amidst all of the unrest and legislation which aims to criminalize and infringe upon the rights of immigrants, I felt an intense panic and fear for my family, for my partner, and for my community. I decided that I would try to help in any way that I could. That's where Quienes Somos came from. Using my art to say something, I created a concert program made up of all Latin American composers to celebrate Latin American culture, the contributions to our society that they've made, and also to raise money for immigrant aid through the nonprofit Make the Road New Jersey, which is an organization that advocates for immigrants' rights in New Jersey. I commissioned two new works for flute and piano to be premiered at this concert and made sure to involve living composers to represent the message that I was putting out there.
Wow. Are you going to tell us how you even got a facility? I didn't ask you this beforehand, but how did you even get a facility to perform in?
Well, that was a big part of the process. I had been talking to a lot of different churches to find a venue for this type of concert. And I found it very difficult at first because, this project, I myself am not a nonprofit. I'm just, trying to survive as a musician as it is. So a lot of this came from my own finances. So when I was talking to churches and they'd have sort of steep prices for renting out a space for this concert, I was determined to find something that would work. And that's when I found actually the First Congregational Church of Montclair, New Jersey. This church community has made it a point to be heavily involved in activistic activities ever since it was formed there. They were doing civil rights marches. They are currently planning a march to Delaney Hall, which is an ICE detention center, and they're heavily involved in advocating for marginalized communities. So when I found them and I spoke to them, I was delighted to create a partnership with them, and it was perfect from then on because our missions were very much aligned.
See, it was brought to you, wasn't it?
Actually, that's a very funny thing. Along the lines of planning and organizing this concert, I was so surprised that so many coincidences kept happening. And when a lot of coincidences fall into place, you almost feel like the universe or a higher power is leaving these things in front of you. So whether
Yes.
it was finding the composers that were really willing to work on this, finding the venue, being connected to other nonprofit organizations that wanted to help with the expenses and with the organization. So many things just fell into line. And whenever those things would happen, I would think to myself, I know I'm on the right path because things
Mhm.
falling into place.
That's it is so true. I know it is. Well, these Sisters of Providence would say that's Providence, Juan Carlos. That's Providence. Now, tell me, you mentioned Susie Ray. What is, get ready for this, audience. There's such a thing as a flute book club. I think I'm saying that right. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
What?
So,
How did you find that? How did Susie find that?
So actually, I'm involved in a lot of nonprofit works. I serve on the board of two different nonprofits that are both related to music education and making music accessible. In both of the nonprofits that I serve, I function as sort of an outreach person. So for the nonprofit, the Flute Society of New Jersey, I had proposed a monthly meeting of a book club for musicians.
The
Yeah,
Flute Society of New Jersey.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I actually created this book club to highlight different books that are related to pedagogy, to highlight people's research in music. And fortunately, Susie was one of the people who registered, and she's been at every meeting. We talk about we've read about different pedagogical books. We just had somebody come and present their dissertation. So that's funnily enough how we were connected.
Small world, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So, ¿Quiénes somos? A very unique approach to fundraising. What did you hope to achieve through this concert? And then can you describe your audience and how you reached them?
Absolutely. The main goal of this concert was to activate people's empathy. I really was aiming for the hearts of the people. Besides raising money for an organization that's already doing great work, I wanted to reveal the true answer to who are we. The answer was really simple. We are humans who deserve dignity. Immigrants contribute greatly to our country, but our current administration abstracts them in order to scapegoat them for their own purposes. This concert was all about storytelling. There are so many stories that we will never know, so many experiences cut short or silenced. Between every performance, we recounted an anonymous story that we collected before the concert, four of which we heard today on this podcast. Um, if you answered the questions at the beginning of today's episode before hearing the anonymous accounts, you might notice that the responses you may have had could be very different from those collected by immigrants in this country. Speaking for myself, my privilege has made it so I have not had to pass through the same tribulations that my parents have had to pass. It is our duty to use this privilege, not to stay comfortable, but to act as shields and advocates for those who cannot safely stand up for themselves. This is part of the work that I wanted to do with this concert, to activate people to be advocates, to be shields. The final two pieces of music that I presented for this concert were performed by myself and a pianist colleague, and they're very special to me. They were commissioned by myself, and I worked with the composers to bring the stories of my family to music. Both Borderless Dreams by Arturo Rodriguez and Relatos Migrantes, which translates to Immigrant Stories, by Jorge Amado, are musical ways to express the instability, danger, fear, and finally hope that immigrants hold in their day-to-day life. I also made some concluding remarks. It was very difficult to get through these because it was very emotional and devastating. My call to action for the audience, who had heard at this point many immigrant testimonies and wonderful music, was done through the reading of names of individuals who had died in ICE custody. The list was very long, and actually, it took up most of the time of my concluding remarks. And sadly, it was not even the full list of people who had died. The most devastating names to read were the final group of names, which included children aged 16 and below. The youngest name of a casualty in ICE detention was a child of about 2 years old. So this, I know, was a strong way to call to the audience to say, we're human. These are, regardless of whether they're children, regardless of where they come from. Within that list, I read also where they came from, and this concert was made through the lens of Latin American immigrants, but I'm advocating for the entire immigrant community. That list contained people from Asia, from even from the Ukraine, from Canada even, who had died in ICE custody. So the purpose of this was to really shock people into action, to say something is not right here, and hopefully that was just a part of mobilizing those people.
I would imagine at the end of that concert, your audience paused. It didn't get up and leave right away, did they?
Absolutely not. It was I also like designed the end of the concert to have a certain effect. The last piece that I performed was one of the commission pieces that I mentioned before, titled Relatos Migrantes, or Immigrant Stories. And that piece is in four movements. Each movement name translates to, for example, the first movement is about origins, about roots. The second one is through unstable or uncertain pathways. The third one is in waiting, and then finally the fourth movement is of the light. So there's a narrative journey. So I ended the concert with this piece, and that last movement, of the light, waiting for the light, ends with this very quiet note on the flute, and it just shifts into this silence. And I remember sitting there in the silence being like, this is why I wanted to end with this piece specifically, because it was this reflective moment of, okay, now we are all going to sit here with the stories we've heard, with the music we've heard, and we're going to translate all of that into empathy, into action, into motivation to do the work that needs to be done to protect the people who are in danger right now.
You know, I know we have to move on. I want to just take a moment here as a side note to our listeners that Juan's going to work through, if he can, licensing and permission for us to put some links into our newsletters so that we can possibly hear those songs. If not now, in the future, you'll be hearing for us, because you can't just snap your fingers and pick up the phone to get that all done. But I'd like to hear that last note. Maybe we can have Susie play that last note for us
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
put it at the end. Tell us about the evolution or the creation of this concert. How did this come to you?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, the idea for this concert came to me kind of suddenly. It kind of just knocked me on the head. I was actually in the middle of work. I was heading uh, back home from New York from a job, and I was sort of reading the news and panicking about the state of things in this country. I immediately jumped into action though. And once I had the idea, the same within the hour, I reached out to composers who might be interested in collaborating for the commissioned works. Truthfully, I had never put a concert together, much less a fundraiser. So it was my first time. I began to work diligently, and I had to learn a lot as time went on. So because it was my first time, I was careful to be attentive to every detail because I really wanted it to be done right. Thankfully, I had reached out to a nonprofit that I have performed and organized with called the Protestra. Um, the Protestra is a protest orchestra. I've played many concerts with them and helped them with some concert organization in the past. This organization raises money for many different and important causes using the orchestra as a tool for protest. They were happy to collaborate and help organize this project. While I spearheaded the work of the protester organizers, Ian Vlajovic and Aaron Schwab were indispensable to this project. They were with me every week, having meetings, organizing, moving things, and even performing in the concert. So I am very grateful to them as organizers and to the Protestra for jumping onto this project and being willing to be led by me. I also had the work of choosing which organization I wanted to benefit. And I had a lot of different options that I was moving with. Make the Road New Jersey, particularly, is an organization that's based in my hometown. They're based in Elizabeth, New Jersey. So they do, but they would do work all over New Jersey and have been successful in addressing the needs of immigrants from financial assistance to educational support to free legal support, civil rights education, and more. So even day-to-day things that like rent stabilization in certain counties, they have been very active. They are community builders within my very own community, and their mission lined up perfectly with my goal for this project. I was also very grateful to reach out to my own friends and colleagues to collaborate as performers for this project. For this project, we had, besides myself, we had another flutist, we had a guitarist, we had a saxophone quartet, a wind quintet. So we had a lot of performers, my pianist as well. So I was very happy to include many of my colleagues on this project. All in all, it was a lot of work, but the results resounded in the community. I feel galvanized to continue projects like these, which aim to advocate and support marginalized communities of all kinds. I'm happy that this project is continuing its impact through podcasts like these, through future performances that I have coming up of the commission pieces. I'll actually be performing one of the commission pieces in another benefit concert that we're organizing with the Protestra on June 20th on World Refugee Day. This time we will be supporting the ACLU New Jersey.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
actually, that opportunity, this is why I think sometimes in moments of doubt, when I obviously, as I was planning the project, I had moments where seeing things coming out in the news or new legislations that stripped more rights away or more protections away, I began to fear that I was pushing against something that I could never move. But then things like this happen where this performance on June 20th the idea actually came from somebody who was in the audience of the Quienes Somos project. So it was you do make a splash and that ripple was felt out, and we have to take advantage of that momentum to make bigger waves. Like I said before, and like I'll continue to reiterate to our listeners, look into your local communities. Find organizations that make an impact on the local level and involve yourselves with them. Alone, we have a limited ability to make a difference, but working together, we can turn the tide. We only need, like I said at the beginning, 3% of people to begin to make a change. That's the initial work. The work you do in your community can change one life, and sometimes that is enough to create a chain reaction. Just like this audience member who was already doing work that's similar to this. Like, we're creating a chain reaction of impact. So with that in mind, with this kind of whole arc of what I went through creating this project and why and its impact, and hopefully continuing its impact, not just for the immigrant community, but I'd also love to focus on other marginalized communities. We can all use community. The point of this was to answer the question of quiénes somos, who are we, right? And the thing is that we are human, we are one. I mentioned earlier how these anonymous stories that we read could be written by somebody you see outside your window walking your dog, or the cashier checking you out at the grocery store. So we really have to continue the practice of putting ourselves in each other's shoes, to see the humanity in other people, not to abstract them, not to vilify them. So with that, I really would love to, if I may, read one last testimony that was submitted for the concert.
Please do.
I came across the work truck of someone who had been detained by ICE. When I looked inside through the window, I could see a lunchbox. Someone had prepared their food for the workday, perhaps with great care by a family member. Perhaps they were expecting their family member to return home after a long day at work. Instead, their work truck was abandoned in a parking lot, and outside the door, on the ground, was one of those red cards with information on what to say if you're stopped by ICE. So I was a little bit floored when I received this testimony, because we had a Google form that we used, and I think it really highlights humanity, right? Because something as day to day and commonplace as having lunch, just thinking about the daily routines. And I invite all the listeners to think about this. What daily routines do you have that, if you just disappeared from one moment to the other, would feel very strange? A lunchbox sitting in the passenger seat unattended, a work truck parked indefinitely in a parking lot. We're living in this time where people are being disappeared, where, I can speak for my own community. Even the man that I buy flowers from every week was taken. And thinking about, yeah, okay, for the average listener, maybe that impact of, okay, well, that person, I didn't know that person, it doesn't affect me. Maybe people are inclined to think that way, but think about, I didn't personally know the man who sells me flowers, but his impact, his disappearance, him being taken is felt everywhere. It's felt in my home. It's felt in where I used to have flowers and now don't. It's felt by his family. And there's these little losses that pile up and are devastating. And I invite everybody to think, these people are human. These people are like me. These people could be me, if the circumstances were different. So I invite people to see the humanity in that type of testimony, and to function from there. Whenever you hear about somebody who was taken, someone who was detained, separated from their family, deported, to think, wow, this is an injustice. If this happened to me, how life-changing would this be in a negative way?
Well, that is our first call to action. When we hear something like this or read something like this, let's remember quiénes somos, what Juan has taught us today. Who was that person? Where did they go? What happened to their family that they left behind on either side? Another call to action that we have is to find Make the Road New Jersey and to donate to them or other nonprofits in your community. Also, you'll see this in our newsletter, Protestra. Protest plus the RA from orchestra. Look them up. Their vision for classical music prioritizes diversity, equity, inclusion, representation, and accessibility. And I'd also like to say, be an upstander. Read our newsletter on upstanding. We can no longer be a bystander. Thank you, Juan Carlos. And thank you, Just Us listeners, for sharing this time and space with us. We hope that you are inspired and have learned from Juan. Are you now ready to make a difference within your own community? If not now, tell me when. We hope you have enjoyed and learned from this episode and will share it with others. Please leave your comments, review, and suggested topics at www.spsmw.org. Are you now ready to make a difference within your own community? If not now, tell me when. Just Us is a production of the Sisters of Providence of St. Mary of the Woods, Indiana. Producers are Susie Ray and myself, Jane Fisher. Our associate producers are Dr. Perlette Springer and Sister Barbara Batista. Please visit www.spsmw.org/justus to leave your comments, reviews, and any suggested topics. Please share the podcast with your family and friends. We'll talk with you soon.